The water was ice at first, sharp like a knife hidden in a river stone. He cupped it, lifted it, and the taste hit him before the thought did. Mashed berries and flour, a hallway lit by a single lamp, a child's laugh that didn't belong to his memory. He swore he could hear a name, soft on his tongue, and he did not know whose mouth had shaped it.
They told him the spring was nothing more than clear mountain water. No ghosts, no magic, just cold, clean relief for hikers and a place to rest. But when he woke with someone else's childhood in his head, he could no longer pretend it was nothing. Do you feel that? The moment the ordinary twists into something else.
I'm Samnang. This is nature's dread. Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on. Listen closely now. Tonight's story is called The Hollow Spring.
His name was Jonah Mercer, park ranger for the High Country District. 3 huts, 14 miles of trail, 1 rusting pickup, and a radio that never quite stayed on the right frequency. He knew the trails by the feel of his boots, the way the sunlight hit the ridge at a certain hour, the scent of pine sap in the air after rain. He loved small things, neat stacks of firewood, the exact way a pack strap rested on a shoulder. He liked being useful, and the park liked having him around. On an afternoon that smelled of wet stone and melted snow, Jonah followed a side trail he'd walked 100 times. The map marked an unnamed spring, just a blue comma tucked into the contour lines. It was one of those places that hides itself, a thin trickle at the base of a mossy outcrop, water pooling in a cupped hollow, like someone had once set down a bowl and forgotten it.
He knelt. The water smelled like stone and a faint iron tang, the kind of scent that makes you think of old houses and metal toys. He drank because he was thirsty. He drank because that's what rangers do. It woke something that did not belong to him. A memory settled in his chest like a small, heavy stone. A kitchen table with chipped blue paint. A song hummed in a voice that wasn't his. A girl's knees under an apron.
At first he rationalized it. He'd been on the trail too long. Heat, dehydration, the lonely work of listening to other people's problems over a radio. The mind borrows things when it's hungry. But the detail that followed was harder to set aside. The name Mara, clear as a bell. And a phrase, under the juniper, beside the stone, that slid into his mouth like a worm on a hook.
2 days later, a hiker called the ranger station, voice shaking, cadence broken. He'd found a wedding band in the roots of a juniper, half buried and clean as if it had just been polished. It matched the description of a ring reported missing in town years before, a little thing nobody had thought about for a long time. Jonah's radio was full of static, and somewhere in that static his mouth remembered Mara again.
Then another person came forward. A volunteer who filled out trail reports had woken from a nap with a memory of a pond that smelled like currants, and of a red scarf she had never owned. She drew a map, just a quick line on a napkin, and it pointed to an arroyo none of them had bothered to check in years. The details were wrong in small ways, right in others, and each time a borrowed memory arrived, the landscape seemed to answer back, as if the land itself rearranged facts until the borrowed pieces fit.
People started talking, campfire whispers, the kind that gather like moths. The spring gives memories, takes them, demands something in return. Some said it healed grief, gave back a lost face for a night. Others said it planted ghosts, reminding you of things you couldn't fix. The town split between those who treated the spring like a gift and those who called it a hazard. Jonah tried to keep his head down. He was a ranger. He was supposed to keep the peace. But Mara's laugh threaded through his dreams like wind through leaves.
And then a memory arrived that would not be ignored. A child's last day, painted in the colors of a late summer afternoon. Bare feet, a paper boat, someone running ahead and not looking back. The detail that stabbed came at the end. Directions to a place with a stone shaped like a sleeping dog. Jonah couldn't file this under coincidence. The park had an official line, do not follow unverified leads. But this was not a report from a caller. This was a life speaking from his mouth, asking for something it had left unfinished.
He told his supervisor he was going to check an old drainage gulch. She told him to take the truck and another ranger, at least for the paperwork. Jonah shook his head. I can fit it in a day, he said. But the sentence hid the reason. He could not stop hearing the child's breath after the paperboat sank. This was when the story changed. The comfort of routine gave way to the pull that sometimes lives in a place. The insistence that something wants to be finished.
The route the memory led him on was wrong in the ways real maps often are. Shifting, subjective. He found paths where the hillsides had been washed smooth and markers where they shouldn't have been. And then, just as the remembered directions had promised, there was the stone, rounded and sleeping in a curve of dwarf juniper. Beside it, under a thin veneer of lichen, something had been disturbed not long ago. He dug with gloved hands and found a tin lunchbox. Inside, a paper boat, brittle and brown, as if it had been left too long in the sun, and a scrap of cloth with a child's name penciled faintly on the edge. Jonah read it aloud before he processed what it meant. Mara, he said. The sound of the name was not only a memory, now it was an accusation.
When he radioed the station, the voice on the other end sounded flat. Official procedure took hold. Preserve the scene, log evidence, notify the sheriff. The park became a nest of forms and questions. Reporters didn't arrive. This was still the kind of place people assumed was quiet, but the town's edges frayed. Neighbors looked past one another. People asked, had something been buried there long ago? Had memories been misplaced for years, finally surfacing like seeds in the thaw? But the hardest moment wasn't the paperwork. It was the way the memory shifted after the tin was found. Jonah kept dreaming of a small bedroom painted green, and of a window that faced the west, where the light came in funny. He woke with postcards of a life he had not lived, last words he had never heard, details that demanded an answer. The borrowed life was not passive. It had edges. It wanted a witness. He started to follow the memories deeper, not because he believed in magic, but because the memories led to people who had been hurt, and it felt wrong to leave them in silence. He spoke to families, traced medical records, turned over old incident reports. Each lead revealed more of the spring's ledger, a bracelet that matched a missing woman's description, a notebook with a teacher's handwriting that no one had seen since she'd vanished. The town's history seemed sedimented into the soil, waiting for someone to read the layers. But there are rules in such stories, unwritten, solemn. Memories are not neutral cargo. Some that come back are warm and easing. Others are knives. The more Jonah waded into other people's pasts, the more the spring pushed back. Conflicting recollections arrived at odd hours. Two people remembering the same event with opposite endings. A man's memory of a face that was a smear to someone who swore they'd known the person well. The spring did not return truth exactly. It returned demand. One night, near the end of his search, Jonah followed a new memory into a narrow cleft in the rock. The air there tasted of old rain and something softer, linen perhaps,
or the scent of a story told too often. He found a shallow alcove and pressed into the stone what looked like carved initials. He traced them and felt the hand of someone who had been there long ago, someone who used the place as a ledger for promises.
The revelation wasn't spectacular. There were no otherworldly lights, no chanting. It was a small, terrible logic. The spring kept fragments of lives because the land wanted to be remembered. If you took a memory, the land would ask you to finish it, bury what had been lost, return what was misplaced, speak a name into being. Some people accepted that debt willingly. Others found it intolerable. Jonah realized he had been conscripted into a kind of caretaking.
The climax of whether obligation beats caution came on a rain-dim morning when Jonah followed a memory to a ledge that looked out over a churning valley. The recollection insisted there was something further to do, something physical and unclean perhaps, that would close the account. He hesitated at the edge, because the land, for all its beauty, has corners that can kill the careful. He made a choice. He would finish what this borrowed life had begun, or he would leave it and let the weight stay on his conscience forever.
He acted. He moved rocks. He cleared a shallow hollow. He read names aloud that the memory gave him. The physical labor of it was humbling. Sweat, blisters, the odd humor of being made to do domestic tasks by a landscape that could not speak aloud. When he finished, the air lightened as if a room had opened. A woman's voice, impossible to be certain whether in his head or on the wind, said thank you. He felt relief. And relief is a kind of mercy.
But not every ledger cleared so cleanly. Some memories fought back, sharpening like splinters. A neighbor who drank to recall a lost recipe began to dream of doors that would not open. A volunteer who returned a locket 2 months after a memory found that her cat no longer came home. The spring had returned gifts, certainly, but it had also redistributed responsibility. People learned to approach it with caution, and then with fear. The town adjusted. Some placed stones by the pool. Others marked it as off-limits. The world rearranged itself around an awkward wound.
Jonah kept a small notebook after that season, the kind with a cracked spine. He wrote names in it that most people had never heard, and he visited the spring sometimes, not to drink, but to listen. People still came, curious hikers, people with grief that needed an angle, the bold. The spring did not care why they came. The land only kept track, and sometimes it reached across the gap between one life and another.
Months later, a child in town asked Jonah if the spring could bring back her grandmother's laugh. Jonah thought of a tin lunchbox, of a paper boat, of a list of names he had memorized. He thought of the way the land keeps a ledger and the quiet cost of closing an account. He said, "Maybe it will. Or maybe it will give you something else you didn't expect. Either way, you must be ready to do the work it asks of you." The child nodded solemnly, which is how towns teach their young the difference between asking and taking.
Sometimes, late at night, when the wind cleans the air, Jonah still hears a laugh not his own. Sometimes, when the rain is small and steady, the spring sounds like footsteps in a hollow house. The hollow holds memories the way soil holds seeds, waiting. And sometimes, when he passes the pool, he drinks small amounts of water, not to borrow a life, but to remember the obligation that comes with knowing another's last things.
If you're still here, it means the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look around your room. Make sure everything is exactly where you left it. If you have a place you visit, a river bend, a porch, a hollow under a tree, remember this. The land remembers too. It keeps a ledger, and sometimes it asks us to finish what it remembers. I'm Samnang. If the hollow spring stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And until next time, check the corners. The night remembers. Good night.